Welcome to another edition of the Business and Personal Podcast, where we bring you closer to the people that you do business with. And today we're joined by Jerry Acciaioli. He is the general manager at CAPS Remodeling. And today we're going to talk about aging in place solutions. I think it's a good time to talk about this. We'll explain why. But first of all, Jerry, thanks for joining us. And how are you doing today?
Doing great, Ryan. Thank you very much for having me on. And it's always a pleasure to talk about our company and to get the word out about what we do.
So CAPS Remodeling, what does the CAPS stand for?
Yeah, everybody gets that question. It's Certified Aging in Place. It's actually an acronym that we incorporated right into the name of our company. So CAPS would be Certified Aging in Place Specialist, which is the last letter S. And basically, it is we're certified to be able to take care of making home modifications that help provide mobility, access, and safety to the disabled and handicapped and elderly.
So what caused you to join CAPS? I know you said that you had a pretty good story on what ended up leading you there.
Yeah, actually, I've known Jeff Cates, the owner, for about 7 years, and I've kind of built a relationship with him and kind of followed him. And I was actually working with him kind of on the side, kind of giving him marketing advice over the years. And he kind of just said at one point in time, "Hey, would you ever consider working for us?" And I've always thought that this business was great because, you're doing something that provides a solution to somebody in need. And, a lot of us kind of get, what's our purpose for our job and that kind of thing. So I just kind of saw that pride that he had in the establishment of his company. And so when he approached me, it was kind of a pretty easy discussion because it was a good job, enabled me to kind of continue to do the things I was doing from a marketing perspective, but it also enabled me to kind of get involved in more of a macro perspective on helping him with the business. And Jeff is actually expanding the company in Florida right now, so he didn't have the time to put into the Michigan operation like he once had. So that was the reason why he kind of approached me to say, "Hey, can you help me out continuing the business moving forward in Michigan while I kind of do a little outreach and start the business up in Florida?" I said, "Absolutely."
And I thought this was a good time to get you on because it's been about a year since COVID hit.
Yeah.
And when you think about the assisted living industry, there's been a lot of questions. It's always a tough decision anyway. Do you send a loved one to an assisted living facility? And then with the COVID outbreak, it made that decision even tougher. And I think it caused people to look deeper into solutions of, well, maybe we can stay at home for a little bit more. What can we do there? So talk about the importance of working with someone that's certified in this specific type of a home improvement rather than just hiring any old contractor.
Yeah, there's more to it than I think the eye would meet. I think a lot of people, as you mentioned, during COVID, probably have had this conversation with a loved one or a family member. And, we had a lot of consultation that went on during this period because there was a lot of reservation about putting people, loved ones, into nursing home facilities, given everything that had been going on and the risk involved. But even before that, it's one of the things that we kind of pride ourselves on is just the whole notion of consultation all the way through completion of project, because there are a lot of questions, and COVID raised a lot of those questions up for people to make decisions on whether they should stay, keep their loved one in their household or, move them into a facility. And those are tough decisions to make. So the fact gathering is a very important part of the whole equation and was kind of escalated during COVID because we had a lot of general inquiries about these types of things. But the most part is it's a very similar conversation because I think everybody kind of realizes there's a certain point in time in somebody's life that they realize that they're not going to be able to have their independence to do what they want anymore. Maybe it was the passing of a loved one and they're home by themselves, or an injury that occurs unexpectedly. There's always some kind of situational thing that leads to these conversations. And COVID was yet another situational thing that came up for a lot of people that kind of prompted these conversations. And of course, we tried to answer them as best we can. And I wouldn't say it generated more business, but it definitely generated more dialogue, which may eventually lead to us providing solutions for other people. But at the same time, there was definitely a surge of activity that went on during this whole COVID phase.
I can imagine. And on that note, what should people be looking for? What triggers should they see where it's time to look at maybe remodeling the home or assisted living? And then where do you think they would know, well, you know what? We don't need to make the leap to assisted living right now, but just do this, this, and this. What's your best advice around all those tough decisions?
Yeah, I think a lot of them are, like I mentioned, are situational. I mean, if people get in car accidents or, have life altering situations with their health, those things immediately are triggers because out of necessity, they have to figure out whether they could still come back to their homes or not. But I like to focus on the elderly really, because that one's the one that's very tricky because unfortunately too often the situation comes up where, it takes a slip or a fall in the house or outside the house that leads to people realizing they finally need assistance. And the elderly, I've noticed, have a lot of pride. They don't ever want to tell you that they have issues. They keep it from their families. And it usually takes, unfortunately, an instant, like a slip and fall or something like that, to make them realize, well, maybe I do need help. So we always try to err on having conversations with people to say, hey, if you have people in their, that are aging or having difficulty with mobility, their balance, that kind of thing, is don't wait, because the cost of going into a hospital for a hip injury or an elbow injury or something like that is going to be way more than just a couple simple installations of grab bars or strategically placed railings in high traffic areas in the house. So back to the triggers, unfortunately, it's never really going to be noticed unless somebody really can just say, yeah, I think I'm slowing down, or I don't have the mobility I once had, or my balance isn't as good as I once had. But it sometimes takes a family member to say, hey, mom or dad or grandma or grandpa, you ever consider getting a grab bar in the bathroom or, in your, steps leading up to your house, that kind of thing. So it's almost like by committee a lot of times where they finally realize, hey, maybe we should do something about this.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of staying in touch, staying on top of things, and not taking things for granted, probably more than anything, right?
Absolutely. And I think a lot of times the family members are the ones that really make the observations. But even then, it's not easy to persuade the individual who is aging that, again, it's a pride thing. And unfortunately, we'd love to get in there and try to get these solutions done before they become, after the fact or reactionary solutions.
So let's talk about some of those solutions. When I was doing some research for this podcast, bathrooms stood out as probably the place to start. I would imagine when you do these consultations, that's one of the first places you look at. That's where most of the problems happen. So I guess let's start about that and some of the options that you can do with a bathroom.
Yeah, bathrooms are, I think you and I have talked about this in the past. It's the area where the incidence or the probability of something going wrong happens, whether you have a tiled floor that's slippery, a tub, even simple tasks like lifting your leg over your tub to get in becomes a challenge for people who don't have the muscle strength or the balance or even the eyesight, the vision, be able to navigate their way through an area that can be slippery. And people, as you know, they spend a lot of time in the restrooms for, every morning it's a routine, every night it's a routine. So the probability of something happening in the bathroom is probably greater than anywhere else, other than your exterior front porches that aren't kept clear, not having rails on your front porch steps, that kind of thing. But the bathroom on the inside of the house is probably the number one thing next to the stairwells. Access to your upstairs or even trying to get downstairs to laundry rooms, that kind of thing. So we tend to focus our first attention on the bathroom area, and even just real simple things are just having grab bars next to the toilet stall, as well as inside the shower, are two simple things that are relatively inexpensive to do, but you could decrease your probability of injury just by adding those two little features in there. And then, of course, we'll do an entire house, consultation, because we ask, the people, what are the rooms you use the most? So what are the areas that you find yourself using on a weekly basis, whether that's the laundry room that's downstairs, or I need access inside of my patio, my walkout patio. So we kind of get an idea of how they like to live their life and where they use the house the most. And then obviously that increases the urgency of where you want to put things for them to eliminate and the risk of them having the slip and fall injuries. I mean, even simple things like proper lighting too. You'd be surprised, you walk in the homes and they're using 60-watt bulbs, and these are people with vision problems, and they could easily a piece of carpet that's not fully tucked in, or a rug. I mean, that nice airy rug that looks nice, But a simple area rug is something that could pose a problem with somebody who has a vision problem and the lighting's dim. So there's all kinds of checklists that we have as we go through homes looking for those things that would best support the individual's needs.
That right there, stuff like that, I think is where the certified piece is so
Right.
important. So let's go back to that a little bit. Talk about what the process is to become certified. What do you have to do?
Yeah, we have all of our technicians are certified. We have the folks that are certified in our overhead lift systems and stair lift systems. The manufacturers that we work with are all top notch, and they obviously mandate that anybody who works with their machinery has to be certified both on installation and knowledge of the actual product. So that's the one thing right there when it comes to any kind of mechanical devices, but even simple things like knowing the rise on a ramp leading into your house. I mean, everything say it's real simple. You just build a ramp and roll the wheelchair up. But now there's ADA compliant regulations that are like second nature to us because we have our entire staff that's trained on these things. And they would recognize right away. We've been to homes where we go in and somebody tried to jerry rig or do their own version of something. And we said, honestly, you're actually putting your loved one at more risk by having them use that wheelchair ramp that isn't. So we do a lot of corrective actions. We do it in a tactful way, but at the end of the day, it's really about the safety of the person that we're there to talk about. And obviously we're trying to do the right things. Now, the one thing we do face too is depending on the person's health or their situation that they're in, there could be a phasing. Like right now, they're in fairly good health, but they may have a degenerative disease that may make them, a little bit worse, a year from now or 2 years from now. So we'll look and assess the situation of the individual and say, okay, right now you're looking at X, Y, and Z, but knowing the condition that your loved one has, here are some other things down the road that you might want to look at and keep in mind. So it's a running dialogue. Obviously, some of these things are a little bit more costly than others, but I think if you start off with the basic things, that's usually a good thing to start. And then again, that's where the dialogue comes in about the future. And, going back to the triggers and that kind of thing, if you have the discussions before the problems become a problem, then you're better off coming in with the proper solutions at the right time.
For someone that's listening to this now is intrigued and they want to have you over for a consultation and maybe start the process, what's a reasonable expectation for how long it will take? I know it probably depends on what types of jobs you're doing, but in general.
Yeah, I mean, we do everything from like I mentioned, the simple grab bars to, full home modifications. Like if somebody wants their entire home fitted to have a roll-in access, if somebody's in a wheelchair, but they still like to cook. So you can modify an entire kitchen to have countertops set up and cupboards that drop down so people can grab. I mean, again, we want to try to make it as livable as possible so everybody can have the life that they were accustomed to. So jobs like that are obviously more extensive because you're talking about a home remodification. And obviously there's a little bit more lead time and budget involved in that kind of thing. But, simple things like grab bars could be next day installation or even same day installation, depending on how busy our crews are at the time. But we've put grab bars in the same day, like literally we'll get a call in the morning and we'll have somebody out in the afternoon. But realistically, it's usually about a day, 24 hours, we'll have somebody out there. As far as consultations go, a lot of those can be done on the phone, simple early discussions. And then if it becomes in something more extensive, then we'll send one of our project managers out there to have a full conversation and actually look at the room and the spec, the sizes and dimensions and really assess the full needs of a project.
But where it stands right now, you're not super backed up where it's going to take months for someone to be able to see somebody. You have enough crew to work on jobs fairly quickly.
Absolutely. We can get those initial consultations and we can also get the jobs going relatively quick. Again, the only ones I have reservations talk about that are the ones that have multiple rooms involved. And, when you have to order some of these custom parts, a lot of times they're not things that are readily accessible. You have to take dimensions and that kind of thing. It's like any home modification. And in some cases where we could be faster than some of the general home contracting stuff that goes on, because that's all we do. We don't do, right, any extra stuff on the side. Everything we do is certified for ADA compliancy and taking care of that, the disabled and handicapped and elderly.
Very good. Well, my podcasts tend to be sometimes on a serious note because I like to take on serious topics that can be, helpful to people. But
Yeah.
I always like to close on a high note, something upbeat. And I know you probably have countless stories, success stories that you could share, but maybe give our listeners an example of a heartwarming story of someone you were able to help out.
Yeah, this one comes up a lot of times, even around here. It's the kind of thing that puts the grin on your face because, that's what I mentioned earlier, why it was easy to make this decision is it's the gratification that you get when you see somebody who is challenged and can't do the things that they want to do. There was a gentleman that, was in his early stage of having a mobility issue, and it kind of accelerated pretty quick. And we were coming up on the holidays, and he really wanted a second stair chair to get from his back hallway into his automobile. And he was trying to get funding for this, and wanted to get this done because he wanted to visit family during the holidays on his own, but he always seemed to have to call somebody. So he was kind of short on funding, and you could just hear the quiver in his voice because he just had it in his mind that he wanted to be independent and see his family and, make the rounds for the holidays and that kind of thing. So he called up a couple days before Christmas, and you could just tell he was just devastated that this wasn't going to go down. So I talked to Jeff, our owner, I said, and Ray, our office manager, we kind of huddled, and he said, let's help this guy out. Yeah. The funding will come. He was confident. I think he was working with his church and a few other organizations. So we just, in the holiday spirit, but also just again, it's doing the right thing sometimes. It was just an easy decision to make. We installed it, said we'll circle back around with you after the holidays are over and we can have another discussion. But just the smile on his face and he sent a nice letter and a thank you. I mean, it just went a long way to go like, that's kind of the reason why we're in this, is to make people's lives a little more, simple. And, again, what are simple tasks for you and I are really challenging, and we take them for granted. But when you start having these conversations with those who are, losing their mobility and their eyesight and other things, it just makes it really easy to make these kind of decisions. And again, that was a unique case because he was already an existing customer. Was a good customer of ours, but at the same time, you just know when it's the right time to kind of step in and do something right.
I love the saying, make your vocation a vacation, that you just love what you're doing, man. And this
Yeah.
certainly fits that, I think,
Yep.
perfectly.
Yep. And I think everybody who works here has kind of all got that same mentality. They all come back with their own little individual stories, whether it's our ramp installers, the little old lady who brings out the hot chocolate and she can barely move herself, but she came out in a wheelchair with her little jug of cocoa and gave it to our crew. And these guys love that stuff. And, there's a bond that happens with these customers, and they're the ones who surprise us. I mean, you would think like, these people have a lot going against them, but when you see that kind of thing, it just kind of makes it all feel right.
Well, hey, I would love to help you generate more success stories with CAPS Remodeling. So what is the best way for people to get in touch with you and try to get this process started?
Yeah, I think the easiest way is really make a phone call to our staff that's on our phone lines. We take the incoming calls. Our number is 248-246-1669. The folks that will answer the call will at least understand what the initial request is. And then obviously, as it gets more extensive, we'll get one of our project managers to start the consultation process. And then we'll go from there. Like literally, it starts with dialogue. And the first place to do is to make that phone call in. There's a lot of information also on our website, www.capsremodeling.com. If you're just doing some early research and that kind of thing, there's a lot of ideas in there that can give you a sense of, hey, I understand my mom or my dad or my grandma or grandpa's condition. If you read through our website, there's a lot of helpful information that will help you get your mind around what you might have to discuss prior to making the phone call in. So if you're not ready for that conversation, definitely go to the website. There's a lot of informational insights on there that will help, to kind of framework your thought process.
Well, very good. So, the message out there for people that are listening is don't just call any contractor if you're looking to remodel your loved one's home, that you really need someone that knows, that can get deep into the weeds and knows everything that needs to be known about the process. So great information, Jerry. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate the time. It's always a pleasure.
All right.